So for the 158th and 159th day of class, I showed you a full-length movie. The only one I show in class because I think it's an important piece of work, and it's called The Atomic Cafe. Now, The Atomic Cafe, I feel, is a perfect film for the Cold War. They piece together very carefully chosen primary sources, and they weave it together that really gives you the essence of the Cold War. Now, I lived in the Cold War till I was about 16, 17 years old. You were not alive during that. So I think by watching this film, it really captures that. And it starts in 45 with the beginning of the atomic bomb all the way to the early 80s when this film was made. So if you are absent, please click on this and also click on this. I'd make a really strong suggestion. I would have the movie playing on one half of the screen and the questions on the other. So I've taken the liberty of having the questions here. And the Atomic Cafe, I broke up into chapters. So chapter 1, these are items that you already learned about. The Manhattan Project and Dr. Oppenheimer and how the Trinity test, and we had Fat Man and Little Boy. Hopefully you remember that from last unit. Now the thing that was new to you is the interview from General Tibbets, the man who dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. Now I would expect some emotion. None. Deadpan. Flat affect. You know, when I showed you that clip of Oppenheimer, how he reacted, I think that was a normal, healthy psychological response. Tibbets, do you think it affected him? I'll let you come up with that. A little more of an opinion, but by watching that interview, kind of creepy, a little bit eerie. And then the second chapter is President Truman being interviewed. He's laughing before the cameras turn on. And then they interview the pilot who dropped the bomb on Nagasaki with a big smile on his face, said it was a thrill. And the, Americans, did they feel empathy? Based on the clips you saw, I saw little empathy, despite the fact that dropping the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, absolute horror show to the people on the ground. So that was chapter 2. Now, chapter 3 shows life after the war is over. They show VE Day, VJ Day, victory in Europe, victory in Japan, and the ticker tape parades, and the dancing, and the hugging, and the whole nine. So after the war, America was feeling good. And then it showed the testing of the bomb on the Bikini Atoll and the film footage from the government telling the people, hey, you're going on a bit of a vacation. Little did they know their entire island would be wiped off the face of the earth. So in terms of propaganda that America fed the Polynesians, that is pretty heavy in chapter 3. Now chapter 4, it was a newsreel explaining, what could happen if communism takes over. That Red Scare. They show that little town in Wisconsin that turned communist for a day. It can happen here. So do you think America was causing its own paranoia, or was the threat of communism legit? And that's a tough question. And, America instilling this fear that it could happen to us, is that collateral damage from the Cold War? Was it by design to get people more united during the Cold War? The Russians had their arms race. The Russians, they were a threat. And them spreading communism throughout Eastern Europe and the world, it's a threat, but how much of a threat? And that's a question I want you to answer. I'm curious to what you think. And then chapter 5, we see when the Soviets get the bomb and the arms race begins. And then they show the Korean War, where it was a proxy hot war of the Cold War. And we saw what happened. We saw what happened when the Red Chinese got in. And the question is, how is the Korean War portrayed during this portion of the film? Do you find any bias in its presentation? Okay, obviously it's a bias. China, evil. North Korea, evil. America and its UN partners, there were 15 or 16 of them, fighting together. It was this division in the world. You have the West and democracy versus the other side of the world, the communist side of the world. And again, when the Soviets detonated the bomb, the arms race was on. Friendly reminder, the Americans and the Soviets created enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world 400 times. That's a lot of destruction. And then chapter 6, we see how politicians were saying, hey, Let's use the bomb in warfare like it was a conventional weapon. We see the rise of McCarthyism, where senators and politicians would accuse you of being a communist. Just the accusation of it could ruin you. You'd get blacklisted. You'd be put on a list. And the Rosenbergs. Now, the Rosenbergs were a couple who were put to death, even though they had 2 small children, for giving secrets to the Soviets. Now, with modern techniques, the prevailing theory is that Mr. Rosenberg was guilty, that he did do it and he got what he deserved. Treason is punishable by death. But the sad part is it looks like his wife was not. So she was an unintended casualty of the Cold War. And it was crazy. Just, congressional hearings, you're a commie, encouraging people to turn people in. This was the hysteria of, the Red Scare during the Cold War. Now, Chapter 7, they start talking about the H-bomb. And they start talking about, hey, we should start building them. The H-bomb is a tool. And they show Eisenhower's rise to power. Now, Eisenhower was the president from 53 to 61. And thank goodness. He had a cool head. And in his speech, he said, listen, let's cool out a little bit. Yeah, we need to be safe. We do not have to be hysterical. Let us get our heads right. Let us process this emotionally and intellectually before we keep building. And I'm thankful for him, because a less cool mind could have resulted in World War III. And I don't think there's going to be a World War IV, if you know what I'm saying. World War III will be fought with atomic bombs. World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones, right? As the old adage goes. And he also talks about, let's be thankful in America that we have so much. And this consumerism is synonymous with the West, that we have, it's the land of plenty with our cars and our supermarkets and that kind of thing. Now, the 8th chapter talks about, life during, an atomic attack. What's going to happen, the rumors and the myth that were circulating. So Americans had so many falsehoods. The classic, that you could get underneath your desk and be safe, and they made these suits and these contraptions, and that you could survive in a bomb shelter. And there's a lot of misinformation and nonsense that fueled this Cold War hysteria. And what collateral damage was suffered due to American nuclear testing? How about all that radioactive fallout that people were exposed to? How about all the damage that was done underground? So to get the bomb and to create the bomb, there's a lot of environmental collateral damage, human collateral damage, and a lot of misinformation. Now, Chapter 9, soldiers preparing for the atomic bomb, and for what American soldiers went through, they were really ill-equipped to be around this amount of radiation. And the film showed soldiers woefully under-equipped with these little radioactive monitors. If it gets too high. So I think this gung-ho nature to make more bombs, the humanity got pushed aside, even to our soldiers, that, what, we got to get the bomb. What happens to you is secondary. And then my favorite, by far, is Chapter 10. The bomb drills in school, and duck and cover. And there was, little cartoons of turtles saying duck and cover. And kids had to practice. Now, I know in school now we do lockdown drills, tornado drills, fire drills. Back during the Cold War, you did nuclear drills, and the teacher would have a whistle. And it was absolutely unreal. So here's the question. Was this type of indoctrination different from fascist and communist regimes? That's a loaded question. Now, to explain your answer, I don't want to give you too much. I want you to think on this one. So this indoctrination that American school children got from America, how is it different than fascism and communism? There's a lot of interesting answers I'm going to get here. So I'm going to let you think for yourself on that one. And then Chapter 11, you emerge from the bomb shelter, and, their applause, and, it's this notion that if you build a bomb shelter, everything will be safe. False security. And throughout history, people hang on to, with both hands, a sense of false security, something to make them feel better. Because inherently, life is dangerous, and and the world is not a safe place, but people need that kind of security blanket, that little whoopee, to make them feel everything's okay. And, was the bomb shelter legit, or was it a whoopee? I'll let you answer this. So and then number 12, you see the end, and here's the question: was the Cold War era a better or worse time to be alive than today? So in the world of terrorism, in the world of school shootings, in the world of overpopulation, what have you, is it a better or worse time to be alive? I don't want to give you too much on this. I'd really like you to think for yourself and give me some evidence. And number 13, what was surprising to you about this film? That's an easy one. You watch this movie, from beginning to end, there's lots of surprising stuff there. I'm not going to give you my opinion here. Which chapter was the most ridiculous? What about it was so ludicrous? Okay, I'll give you my opinion on this one. Chapter 10, by a mile. These 9 minutes, holy shnikes, they were ludicrous. And number 15, although I've preached all year about the value of primary sources, do you feel the filmmakers use primary sources to create propaganda and a bias and explain your thinking? So it's not so simple toward the end of class. Primary sources are always inherently unbiased. If you piece them together, do they tell a story? Now, recently, the O.J. Simpson trial, what happened to O.J., did the same kind of thing where they pieced together nothing but primary sources. But those filmmakers made a point. And these filmmakers who made the Atomic Cafe made a point. So I hope you enjoyed it. To me, I think it's a very important work of the Cold War. And please show me your thinking in these in your answers, and I look forward to reading them. So thank you for watching.